People are always like, how do you define self-love? I don't know what that means. What does that even mean? And I have a very clear definition of self-love, which is, self-love is being more committed to your happiness than to your suffering in every single moment.
Hello, and welcome back to Seek the Joy podcast. Happy Seek the Joy Tuesday. I'm your host, Sydney Weiss, and guys, this week we are in for a real self-love treat because on the podcast this week is Nitika Chopra, inspiring talk show host, beauty and lifestyle expert, self-love guru, chronic illness advocate, and soul sister. And I was so excited to sit down and have this conversation with Nitika. She has really been a leader in the wellness industry since she founded her blog in 2010, and she more recently has taken everything that she's learned from suffering with psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis for the past 27 years to create a really important and impactful conversation about self-love in the chronic illness community. And on this week's episode, Nitika shares her journey with chronic illness and how she began to really thrive through compassion, nourishment, and self-love. We chat about Nitika's definition of self-love and the moment that she realized that loving herself was an option and how she shifted her perspective to really living a life of joy. We have a really wonderful conversation about teaching what we need to learn, how we can begin to recognize our own light, and showing kindness and compassion for our mind and body. Plus, Nitika shares what thriving with a chronic illness looks like today, joy in her life, what's ahead for 2019, and so much more. Before we dive into this week's new episode with Nitika, I have to share with you guys the iTunes review of the week, and this week it comes from KT Monty, and it says, "Great podcast. I'm just getting into this podcast and I am loving it. Sydney is a wonderful host, so approachable and down to earth. I just listened to the first Soul Chat episode with Katie Calder, and after listening, I am so ready to just be myself and stop actively thinking, should I not share this? Will I sound weird? This episode was just the push I needed to be myself and share what is lighting me up. Looking forward to more." Katie, I am so happy that you found Seek the Joy. I'm so happy you found the podcast through the conversation with my friend Katie Calder. Oh my God, I'm loving this. Thank you so much for taking a couple of seconds to rate and review the podcast. And guys, if you have been enjoying Seek the Joy, or even if you're brand new to the show and you want to show a little love and support, I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or really wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. And when you do, make sure to take a screenshot of your review and send it to Sydney@seekthejoypodcast.com. I will send you our guide for infusing more joy into your life, some Seek the Joy podcast stickers, and honestly, a giant thank you in the form of an email. I mean, honestly, guys, it's one of my favorite things ever to connect with you outside of the weekly show, whether it's via email or on our social media pages. It's just so wonderful to get to learn about you and know you and get to know who's tuning into this show. So I would be so grateful. All right, guys, that's it. I am just so excited about this week's new episode with Nitika. She is such a light, and I'm so grateful that she came on the podcast to share her journey. I know that her experiences are really helping so many shift their perspective, feel their difficult emotions, and really offer themselves genuine care and love to live a beautiful life that they deserve. So after you tune into this one, join the conversation on our social media channels. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Nitika.
My name is Nitika Chopra, and I'm super pumped to be here on this podcast. Sydney,
I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I've been an entrepreneur for almost 10 years now. I started my business in 2010 officially, and I basically decided that I wanted to have a talk show and had no experience or resources or connections. Yeah. And I decided to make my own version of a show on the internet through an online magazine that I built. And it was called Bella Life, and it was live and kicking for about 5 or 6 years. And I had over 100 contributors writing for me. And we would write about everything that I would want to talk about on a talk show as it relates to wellness and self-love. And then I would do video on there and, have that as well so people could see what I look like on camera.
Yeah.
And I just had this dream that someone would eventually, hire me for that. And it was really because I knew I had a skill and a talent when it came to like creation of content and, being in front of the camera. But I also had a really big story that I wanted to share about my own journey and my own life. And I never wanted it to be purely entertainment based. So I kind of wanted to mold all of that together. And then I ended up, transferring. I actually ended up getting a talk show on Z Living, which is the holistic lifestyle channel owned by Asia TV. Wow. People are always like, on TV? And I'm like, yes, on TV.
That is so cool.
It was a really big blessing and one that I'm so grateful for. The opportunity was so transformative and just so incredible. And we filmed a couple of seasons of that, and I went on to represent some beauty brands and be a spokesperson. And I was also on QVC for a while. And there's a lot of beauty focused stuff in there because my talk show was called Naturally Beautiful. So it was like a natural progression.
Yeah.
And then I just went on to have my own blog. And from there, especially just in the last year, actually, I've really put a focus on the chronic illness community. I was diagnosed with my first chronic illness at the age of 10, which is psoriasis. And I was diagnosed with my second chronic illness almost a decade later at the age of 19, which is psoriatic arthritis. And so I've kind of, over the past year especially, been taking all of these tools and resources and pieces of content and really focusing them on that community, but with a lot of the same concepts and heart to it. So that's a little bit about me.
I love this. I love just the natural progression, but I'd love to rewind a little bit because I think it's often, those experiences we have when we're really young that end up molding and shaping who we are and the direction that we take our life. And so when you were diagnosed with psoriasis at age 10, what was that experience like, living in your body, experiencing that pain and that discomfort, at such a young age?
Yeah, it was really, of course I'm 37 now, so it was a very long time ago, but from what I remember, it was actually probably one of the times I remember feeling most disconnected from my body.
Yeah.
Because it was like I was being told that this thing was happening to my body, but like I didn't resonate with this thing at all. I didn't feel connected to that at all. But it was happening to me at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
but
it does, yeah. It's kind of like it's happening, but you don't really connect with that it's happening, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. It was very much an out of body experience. And, I was I had a lot of challenges as a kid that had nothing to do with health, like just being in my home. And I grew up in a pretty conservative, strict Indian family. As Indian families go, they're very liberal. But, for me, as an American kid, I was first generation American, and I did not resonate with anything my parents wanted to feed me, the way they wanted to dress me, the way they wanted me to talk, and how they wanted me to behave. It just nothing resonated with me. And so it was kind of a challenging time to begin with. And then when I got my diagnosis, I just remember feeling like, everything was really bad. Like everything was going really, really wrong. And this was just kind of like the extra cherry on top, and I don't feel that way about it at all now, but that's how I felt about it at the time, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah. And I think at such a young age too, when you're experiencing, societal pressures and familial pressures, and you're really not even coming into your own yet at that age. And I can imagine it continued just to shape, your worldview and also probably, right? Like how you felt about yourself.
Oh yeah. I did not. That's why I always say, which I've heard many times from many teachers, that, you teach what you need to learn. And it's always funny to me. People are like, oh, so you must love yourself so easily, or how did they assume that, I'm a perfect master at self-love because I teach it. And I'm like, no, people, this is why I teach it, because I'm not that great at it. Like I'm great at it now,
Right.
but when I was growing up, I mean, I didn't like anything about myself. I actually didn't even know that that was like an option. I mean, as weird as that might sound, it didn't even occur to me that you could like yourself. All of the negativity that I was being fed from all sides of my life, it just felt like, that was normal because it was my normal for so long.
And especially if you're not having conversations with other people about how they feel about themselves. Like growing up, we never had conversations with our friends about, at least I didn't, about, hey, do you like yourself? Are you happy with yourself? We don't have conversations like that. So you're really just stuck basically with the dialogue that you're having in your head, and you don't know any different.
Yeah, exactly. I never had conversations like that. I didn't even know that was an option.
Yeah, so me neither.
Totally agree.
And so then at what point did you start to realize, okay, it is an option to love myself. It is an option to speak to myself differently, to really have a different experience?
I think it happens in layers, over and over and over and over again, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But I think the first time I remember really even knowing that there was another side to life, and that it didn't have to be so harsh and negative like it was in my head all the time, was when I was 19. I used to be married, which is like another part of my story. Mm-hmm. And I got married at the age of 20 to a man that I fell madly in love with. And I always say, even though we're not married anymore, like I will forever be grateful to him, because he was the first person, I say, like, who taught me what happiness was. He kind of saw the light and like the brightness and the spirit that people see in me now before I ever, showed even an inch of that in my real life. When we started dating, I was covered from the tip of my foot to the tip of my head with psoriasis. And my bones were becoming deformed, and my emotions were all over the place because I was so traumatized by what was going on with my body. Yeah. He never saw any of that, Mm-hmm. And so it's not so much about him as much as it is like he was a catalyst to then get me started I took a course called the Landmark Forum, which a lot of people know about. And I was only 19. So it's like an ontological, like spiritual kind of, learning about who you're being in the world. And so I took that course, and I just didn't even know that I was being anything. Like I had no idea that that was even a thing. Again, I was a kid. So from there, I decided to like become a life coach, and I got my training and did a course for a year doing that. And so it was a lot of like foundation building in like rewiring my system initially from like 19, onwards. And then beyond that, I would say it's just a constant evolving evolution of like, every day I feel like I have to commit to something different, other than my negative thoughts. Because I always say, people are always like, how do you define self-love? I don't know what that means. What does that even mean? And I have a very clear definition of self-love, which I share on my blog a lot and through public speaking and all the things that I do, which is, self-love is being more committed to your happiness than to your suffering in every single moment.
I love that.
And to me, it is so crystal clear. Because I am a person, as much as I'm like very emotional and like the, gray areas of emotion, and I don't think everything is black and white. I think I can feel like I can move forward in my life and I can take action when I know, like when I have clarity, and so I need some sort of structure. So for me, that's like very clear, like, okay, I'm about to eat this food. It's not about, how many calories is it? How am I supposed to eat it? Is it the right food? Is it the good food? It's like, okay, if I'm living by, I'm going to be more committed to my happiness than to my suffering. Is this food going to bring me true happiness, or is it going to bring me true suffering? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And even like people that I have in my life or the job that I'm doing or, the partner that wants to work with me. And I'm like, oh God, this doesn't feel right. Although they're going to pay me money, some year it doesn't feel right. So it's always a measure for me. And I have no idea what your original question was, but I hope I answered.
I love this because it's really, self-love is an evolution. It is a journey and it isn't something we arrive at. It's not a destination. So I love the evolution and I love this definition of self-love and being more committed to your happiness. That itself is a journey too. And being willing to say, hey, I don't want to sit in the suffering. I might be experiencing it, but I don't want to sit in it. And I think it's so powerful and something I think we're all really, continuously working towards.
Yeah, I think it's a really clear way to kind of navigate the conversation, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And so do you feel like it was at that point in your early 20s when you were really starting to do this inner work within yourself? Do you feel like that was really the jumping point for you?
My jumping point was really a bit sudden, I would say, but it also had like a lot of things leading up to it that I didn't realize were jumping points, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is that I started my business when I was about like 28 years old. And it was very much like an all of a sudden I'm doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like the years leading up to that, I couldn't really work until I was about 25, 26 years old because of my health.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a lot of experience with working and I didn't have, the internships and the day jobs and all that stuff that a lot of people had because I just physically couldn't.
Right.
But then it was like this, kind of just deciding I knew I had this thing I was supposed to do. I don't know if that, resonates with anybody listening, but it was always this thing that like, if you looked at my life at the time, I mean, I would sound like a crazy person because I sounded like I had some lofty dream of doing this thing that makes absolutely no sense. And there's no visual evidence as to why, anything that I'm saying should ever happen in real life.
Yeah.
But I had this tapping on my heart, and it wasn't even a tapping. It was like a pounding on my heart. That was speaking to me so clearly. You're meant for something greater. You're meant for something greater. And it was a voice. I'm a very spiritual person, and it was a voice of God and my intuition that I've been hearing for, at this point, pretty much my whole life. But it was like a turning point for me where I really decided to try and follow that and listen to it in a way that was a little bit more practical while still leaning on my intuition, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think I was gathering like many people, right, who might like do their friends' makeup for their whole lives or like love doing like styling for their best friends and don't even realize it's like their complete calling.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like a lot of that kind of stuff where I was constantly trying to nurture my body and nurture my thoughts and get out of the ditches of self-doubt and self-loathing and all of that and really love myself to better health. But that was just for pure survival,
right.
And then years later, it kind of all came together when I started to really follow my intuition. And that's, what I mentioned earlier when I was like, okay, I'm just going to create this website and see what happens.
Yeah. I think it takes a lot of courage to listen to that inner voice, right? And that inner whisper and calling. And I think we all experience it, to one, extent or another, but to have the courage and the willingness to say, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to publish that post. I'm going to create that website. I know for a fact, because I've been there, that it definitely takes a lot of courage and a big, leap of faith in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. It took everything in me. And sometimes it still does. I've been pretty open about the fact that like 2016, like post-election, man, it was not easy.
I was in bed for 3 days. So I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a lot of, and not just like immediately after, but like all of 2017 too. I felt like I was so unsure of what the future was meant to hold. And that's not like me. I'm usually very clear about what I think my future is going to have. And after the election, I think, like so many people, I just felt so lost. And I felt like I felt my mortality for the first time in a way that I hadn't before as like a woman of color and, spaces that are not always the most kind and loving. And I almost like my eyes just really became so wide and absorbing all of this truth that like I wasn't trying to ignore, but I didn't even know was a part of life almost. Like it was like not my personal reality. So I was kind of blind to it in a lot of ways. And just all these things. So even now, it's like I really have to call on my belief in myself after all of that, after, probably from 2016 to the middle of this year was really challenging. I was just kind of like, what is going on with this world? Like, I don't understand.
I still don't understand.
I still don't understand either. But I feel like I understand myself a little bit more on the other side of it, but I don't even start to claim to understand our world. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you just said about that belief in yourself and fostering that belief in yourself, whether it was when you were growing up or in the last couple of years with everything we've been experiencing and that you just touched on, how were you able to connect or reconnect with that belief in yourself? Because I think when we have so much going on the external and then also internally that is tumultuous and difficult and challenging, it's often really hard to bring yourself back to saying, hey, I believe in what I'm doing and who I am and where I want to go, from here.
Yeah. I mean, not to sound cliche, but it's a mixed bag of a lot of things. But one of the biggest things has been I've had to give up and surrender a lot. Yeah. And like even last year, it's like I haven't had a day job since I got my talk show, which was in 2013. And I didn't get a day job last year, but I took on a couple of like consulting clients and marketing and stuff because something that I happen to love. And that was a huge act of surrender for me. I was just kind of like, okay, God, I thought we had a deal here. This is not working out the way that I thought things were going to work out. This is so weird and kind of awkward because I don't understand what you're doing. Literally, these are the conversations that I have with God. And I'm just like, but I have to like take care of myself and make sure I'm, I have enough resources and make sure I can pay my health insurance every month and all the things, right? Right. So I was just kind of like, all right, God, I'm going to do what I need to do to take care of myself and just assume that you'll like make it work if it's meant to work. And I'm going to keep writing my blog and doing the things that like make me happy, but I'm not going to stress out about it in a way that's going to really like destroy my spirit. Right. Because that happens very easily. And I think I've even had to do that. I mean, I know I've even had to do that a bunch of times with even my health sometimes, okay, I'm going to try this new thing. I'm going to do this new regimen. I'm going to try this new health routine or this new diet from my doctor or medicine or whatever it might be. And I think it's going to be the end all be all. And it doesn't work, or it doesn't work as long or as well as I think it's going to. And it's really defeating and it's really frustrating. And then at the end, I have to just let it go and just be like, okay, God, like I'm doing all I can on a human level. I need you to show me like what's true here and like what I'm really meant for here. And I'm just going to like let the rest go. So I think in terms of getting back to like the belief in myself, I think it's been like a mixed bag of all of those things. Doing the human action items that I can and like praying the amount that I feel like I can, having gratitude to like make sure I stay in like a good amount of like high vibe energy, but also not like being toxic with that mentality either and trying to put pressure on myself to always be high vibe. Right. That's why I say it's like such a mixed bag and it's not necessarily one thing, because I think the one constant is that there's just always this need to really know yourself well enough to know what you need to keep going. And like, it's like another part of what I find self-love is as well. It's like knowing yourself so that you know how to be more committed to your happiness than to your suffering.
Yeah. Know yourself well enough to be able to keep going and take care of yourself. And so if someone is listening and they want to begin that process of getting to know themselves better, where would be a good place to start? Or where was the place that you started that was really helpful for you?
Yeah, I find that I'm like a list person. Like I like making lists. I'm such a nerd, but it's true. I'll be on the subway, because I live in New York City, and I'll be on the subway or in an Uber coming home late or whatever. And I sometimes will just do an inventory of my day and start to think of like, what are the things that really like lit me up today? Because sometimes you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
You're just going from one thing to another, or you're focusing on the negative or whatever it might be. And then I'll kind of linger there and start to see, because I love creating content. So then I'll start to be like, oh, is there a story here? Like, what is this? Like, just kind of sit in it, right? It's like, we don't give ourselves time or space to just explore ourselves. And I think in my mid-20s, I had a lot of time to explore myself, my early 20s, because I was in bed a lot. I wasn't really able to move for a lot of that time. So I spent a lot of time like journaling and getting into the habit of, I had a lot of alone time. And I realized people often don't believe me, but I'm actually very introverted, and I am enthusiastic and excited, but that doesn't mean that I'm an extrovert. I'm actually very much an introvert.
Yeah.
I give myself the time to, really go inward and say, like, even last night, I was supposed to go to an event, and I really make a point not to cancel on people, but every cell in my body was like, please just lay down. Please just lay down. But how many do we ignore that? So
too many times for sure.
Yeah. I texted my friends and I said, I hate canceling, and I really don't ever if I can help it, but I really need to stay home. And it was totally fine.
Yeah.
And I just got the night to like, it doesn't mean I'm sitting there saying Om all night long and like, playing with my mala beads, but like, it's just like, just giving myself that time just to be like, okay, I'm going to just sit here and veg out and give my body and my mind a little bit of time to like disconnect from having to, be on and be pulled together and, present myself all the time. It really helps.
Yeah, we need that balance, right? I mean, you can't be on all the time. I mean, it's impossible, but I think it's a process of, I think being able to cancel on an event or being able to say, hey, I can't do this right now. That's also a really important part of self-love, is honoring yourself and knowing your limitations. You really can start to know those limitations and know where your boundaries are and what you need once you start to really develop that relationship with yourself and that knowing and that understanding. And so it's really important to definitely take that time.
Yeah, I love that for sure.
So do you feel like today, it definitely sounds like you're definitely more in tune with who you are and what you need and with your body. Do you still have moments though where you feel like I'm not present in my body, maybe the same way you did 10, 15, 20 years ago when you first really embarked on this journey with psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, let's say if my norm was 1 out of 10, I was, constantly at a 4 or 3. I don't think my norm is as low as it used to be. I think I've, kind of gotten to a new normal. So my norm is probably more like a 6 or a 7 in terms of being connected to myself and my body. But I would say I go down to my norm often.
Yeah.
I'm very much like a doer. And even though I'm an extrovert, I like love being productive. An introvert. I love being productive and I love getting things done. So I just feel like when I don't have energy, like physical energy, and I feel like my energy is a little bit low, I get so hard on myself. Like, I'm just like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you able to do more? Like, why are you so tired? It kind of reminds me of like when everyone thought I was just like lazy as a kid, but I was actually just like really sick and not feeling well, so I get really hard on myself. So I have to change things up even with that. Like, today, I did a bunch of work this morning and I've got a bunch of calls and interviews this afternoon. But in like mid-morning around like 11 to 1, I just cooked for myself for like 2 hours. And I was like, screw everything else. Like, it can wait, and it's true. It can wait. I've kind of gotten the bulk of my like emergency work done. So, I feel like it happens to me a lot with stuff like that. And it's just a practice. That's like being more committed to your happiness than your suffering.
Yeah.
Like, if I put off cooking for the week any longer, I would be more frustrated like this afternoon,
Of course. Yeah. And I think part of that too is having it sounds like it's about being able to pivot in the moment and then also having compassion for where you're at and what you need. And do you feel like self-compassion is also a big part of self-love for you and in your practice?
Yeah, I actually say that it starts with compassion because I think about it a lot. Like when I was in the thick of my health stuff, and even now, like my weight fluctuates a lot with my health, like because everything is digestive with autoimmune.
Yeah.
So some people like lose too much weight because of their health. Like I don't have that problem. I tend to get a little softer, and my belly tends to be a little bit more, softer than I want it to be sometimes. And working out has been challenging for me with my arthritis and stuff like that. So I'm constantly like trying to get that part of my body and also like my inner dialogue just to be still and okay. And so I feel like, for me to go from having a softer tummy than I want and saying, oh my God, this is the most beautiful tummy that I've ever seen is just not real for me sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is frustrating. And sometimes I do feel like I'm angry that like I eat so well and because I have certain conditions, like the weight isn't shifting or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then when I get to that place of saying, like a lot of times what that looks like is I'll, put my hands on my tummy and I'll speak to my body. And I do that with my skin, with my psoriasis, with my joints, and, with my weight sometimes. And I'll say like, for my stomach, I'll say something like, oh, I'm sorry that I've been so angry at you. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I haven't been taking care of you. I know I've been feeding you all kinds of things that it doesn't really make you feel good because I've just been so frustrated. And I literally will talk to my body like that because it deserves that kind of care, and I did that with my skin for years, starting in my early 20s. I would just say like, I'm sorry, I'm furious with you right now. But that is like, you think about it when you talk to a friend where there's like friction or tension or frustration.
Yeah.
And if you just name it, it's like everything dissipates. You're just like, okay, like now we can go somewhere, right? It doesn't mean you agree with the friend. It doesn't mean the friend's perfect. It doesn't mean like you don't have, things that you could learn. But now you can go somewhere when you just name the fact, you know what? I'm really upset. I can't believe you did this thing.
Yeah.
We can move forward.
Yeah.
So I feel it's the same with your body. And I've practiced that for, almost 2 decades now of just being like, okay, like what can we do? How can we move forward with this? How can, I'm really angry with you right now. Like, why do you have to be itchy today? Like, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
Then I can start to try to love myself after I acknowledge what's really there for me.
Yeah, we have to be real with like what the emotion is in that moment, what you're upset about, what you're angry with. And then from there, you can really transform it and offer yourself or whoever it is, that genuine care and love and compassion. A lot of your work too is, and we've talked about it throughout this conversation, but it's about thriving with a chronic illness. And today, what does living or thriving with a chronic illness really look like for you? Is it the work that you're doing? Do you feel like you're able to thrive now?
Yeah, I actually sometimes am surprised at how much, like, I don't take anything for granted. And I think, a lot of people are like that, but especially if someone's been through a really hard situation, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally or financially, whatever it might be, it's just like when it's good, it's hard not to be like, holy crap, I'm so grateful that this is good. And I feel that often, when I first moved to New York when I was 19 or 20, I couldn't take the subway for like the first 6 years because I couldn't walk down the steps. So every time I walk down the subway stairs, I never walk down, even now, 15 years later, I never walk down a set of subway stairs without thinking about that moment. And I'm just like, oh my God, thank you with every step. So I do feel like I'm thriving. I've got lots of relationships in my life that I'm so excited about and passionate about. And I feel very blessed to have a very full life of friends and family. And I have a business that I'm so grateful for. And I love being able to, have this business every day. And, I'm cooking for myself in my apartment in the Upper West Side in Manhattan. It's like all of that. I mean, just that is just like, oh, what a blessing,
Totally. Yeah.
So,
I love that.
I do feel that I'm thriving.
I love that. I love that what you just shared too about the subway. It's like things that were so difficult or things that you couldn't do, at one point is now a daily or weekly or monthly part of your life. And I think it's really beautiful just to be able to look back, right, and see just how far you've come and the things that you're able to do now. And anyway, I love that. I think it's amazing to hear. And so I've got to ask you about joy in your life because we are on Seek the Joy podcast. What are some things that bring you joy? And do you feel like it's an emotion that you can connect with easily? Or what has your journey been like with joy?
Yeah, I love joy.
You and me both.
I mean, I think that's pretty easy to do, but I love joy. I think it's really interesting because a couple of things. The first thing that comes to mind when you say, are there things that bring you joy? Absolutely. I would say puppies bring me lots of joy. I used to have a dog for 10 years. She passed a few years ago, but I love dogs and animals. But one of the things that I'm actively engaged with that brings me joy is singing. And I've sang, my whole life since I was 13 years old. And it was, it's not something I share that much like personally, but I actually am in a chorus that was started by the founders of the Women's March called the Resistance Revival Chorus.
Amazing.
And so, it's been amazing because I've been able to like literally use my voice for the better and for, really important causes and for lots of activism work and all of that, which has just been such a blessing and such a gift. So I love to sing. And I always, since it's not because I have like the most magical voice, but ever since I started singing, I always felt that singing is the time that I feel like I'm holding God's hands the most. It just instantly takes me there. And it's just an amazing thing. So I love singing. And I also, in terms of joy, I think I've gotten better at just trying to like have more adventure and spontaneity in my life because I think I can be a little regimented with all the things I have to do with my health, especially. It's like you can get like, okay, I have to take the supplements and eat the certain food and have the certain amount of sleep and do all the things. So it can feel a little hard to be spontaneous, but I do love adventure and surprise and all of that. So I think I've been making a conscious effort to include that in my life, even though it feels a little uncomfortable sometimes. It ultimately almost always leads to massive amounts of joy. And then the other thing that comes to mind when you ask that is just that like people always say, when I'm on my Instagram and stuff, I'm often showing like some bright, beautiful, like, happy moment or, giving some sort of inspiration or showing that I'm at an event or that I'm with a cool friend or whatever. And people are always like, you're just so happy all the time. And my initial reaction to that is I work my ass off to be happy. That is the real truth. And I feel that my ability to have joy and be happy is in direct relation to the amount of darkness that I have felt and seen in my life. It's like, it doesn't mean you have to experience darkness to experience joy. I don't wish that on anyone, but I do think that there's this like kind of realness around joy that it feels that much sweeter and that much more powerful when we're able to see it in contrast with all the other things that we've gone through. It's like so much brighter and lighter and really cool.
I love that. First of all, amazing that you sang and that you joined that, what is it, the Resistance Choir?
The Resistance Revival Chorus,
That's amazing. That is so cool. I had no idea. But what you said just now about just the ability to really appreciate and see and feel the joy because you've seen the contrast, it reminds me of something that I've been telling myself quite a bit over the last couple of months, which is we can't always control our circumstances. We can't always control what's going on, but we can choose how we show up and we can choose what we want to focus on. And so there's so much power in choosing to focus on the good and the joy and the things that you love every day, especially if you're experiencing moments of difficulty, or you have experienced moments of difficulty that really do show you, that contrast.
Yeah. I think so. I think so for sure. It's important to take that time and really let it seep into your cells, in a way where you can really appreciate it.
Yeah, I so agree with that. So today, is there like a mantra or an affirmation that you rely on or that's really helped you throughout your journey?
When you say that, I'm like, oh gosh, there's so many.
I know.
But
there's so many good ones.
There's so many good ones. But I think the thing that's honestly helped me the most is always here. I heard this message when I was really young, going through one of the worst moments of my health journey. And I heard this message from God that was like, this isn't about you. And a lot of times in my life, I've had to go back there, like multiple times in a hard time. And then I feel like at least once a month, I go back to that place. Like I'm stuck or, I'm like frustrated. I haven't written a blog in like 2 months. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Like I should have written a blog. I should have done this or I should have done that. And then as soon as I go to, this isn't about you, I can jump right into service.
Yeah.
And just take myself out of the equation in a way that is deeply fulfilling for me and also creates a ripple effect for other people.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest thing. That's probably the thing I go back to the most.
That's beautiful. And that really resonates with me, because when we start to get wrapped up in our maybe worry or anxiety or how, if we haven't shown up the way we want to, and we make it more about ourselves, we forget why we started in the first place. We forget why we're sharing. We forget that ultimately it is about service and sharing and connecting. And so I love that has really kept bringing you back and it sounds like it fuels your passion too. And it fuels your willingness to, be brave in those moments and keep showing up, even when in the moment it feels hard or it isn't something you really, feel like doing.
Yeah, I think it just makes all the difference. It makes me feel like I can really create from the most connected, part of myself and the most honest and real part of myself when I just get out of the way, honestly.
Yeah. You've done so much since you started on this journey of sharing, and with your talk show and your blog and everything else that has come with it. Is there something that maybe stands out to you that has been just like the coolest thing that you've done or experienced or shared that's connected with others? Is there something that stands out to you that's like, wow, this is maybe top 10 of the coolest things that have happened since you've started?
Oh gosh, it really is hard to say. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question. It's such an interesting question. Okay. One of the coolest things ever, now that I'm thinking about it, is, after my talk show, I went through this period where, I realized I got a talk show, but that didn't make me Oprah or Ellen. And I was like, oh, so I have to keep going and I have to keep creating things. Yeah. And it was kind of a rude awakening. And I decided to create this business around doing live events for people. And I just kind of made it up out of thin air, like most of the things that I have done, honestly.
Yeah.
And it was actually connected to the fact that before I started my business, I actually hosted these really small events with 8 or 10 women in a friend's living room. And I decided that I wanted to embody the spirit of being a host, because that's how badly I wanted to be a host. And I was very clear about it. But I had never really monetized the events because I didn't know anything about that, so I just was kind of doing them and trying to fill them and excited about them and stuff like that. But that was pretty minimal. And then a few years into my business, I hit a wall and I was like, oh, so yeah, I'm not Oprah. That money that I made was not going to last forever. It's good to know. And I just decided to create kind of a bigger business around it. And I launched something called the Selflove celebrations. And I used to do those twice a year. And I had 25 partners and 200 people would come. And wow. They were these huge things. And I did them by myself, and I kind of don't know how I did that actually, but it was really awesome. And I think, now that I'm being asked the question, I think that's something I'm very proud of, because I just feel like one, my back was up against the wall and it was another one of those moments where I totally could have quit on myself and just been like, okay, I give up, whatever. And it was a moment of like, what do I really want to do? And what could I do that would make me really happy doing it, but also like make money and also be of service. And so it was kind of like that trifecta. And I'm really proud of that, and it's evolved. Now I do like intimate chronic self-love dinners, and I work with partners and influencers doing those. And I'm working on a conference for next year. So it's like, it's evolved in so many things, but events, as much as like some people who don't live in New York might not know this because I've only done them in New York, but events have kind of been like a big staple of my career, which is just something I am proud of, actually.
That's so cool. I had no idea. That's amazing. And I think just the ability to pivot in that moment and be resourceful and create something, that you loved and figured out how to make it part of your life it's really cool to hear.
Thank you so much.
So moving forward, because I want a future trip with you just a little bit,
Sure.
What would you say is your biggest dream?
I have a dream to have my own like product company, I guess you could say. It's something that I've always wanted. It's funny because like when we talked about surrender earlier at the end of last year, I was like, okay, God, I'm letting this go.
Yeah.
Like, if this isn't what you want for me, fine. Like, it's fine. I just want to serve people and like make good money and feel good about it.
Yeah.
But my first dream that I had kind of simultaneously when the talk show dream came about felt way too big for me to even hold. Mm-hmm. So I kind of let it go after a little while. And it was always to have my own product line, to have like a line of products that really enhance and capture and create self-love in people's homes and in people's lives, much like I felt like a beautiful journal or a beautiful like picture frame or nice candles or, incredible hand cream or whatever it might be, like really nurtured me, from the inside out when I was really going through some of the hardest times in my life. So with intention and, all of that. So that's the dream, but
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that. And it's so cool to be able to draw, on your own experiences and what served you and what helped you, and to then be able to, share it with others. It's amazing. So what is ahead for 2019? Because we're at the start of a new year. And so what's ahead for you?
Yeah, well, I think by the time this episode comes out, my podcast would have been out.
Amazing.
So that's exciting. I'm really excited about it. It's actually one of the first things in a long time that I've created that I'm nervous about, which is like kind of cool. It's kind of a cool feeling to be like you put me on camera or give me a talk show. Like I'm not nervous about that at all. Like I can do that in my sleep. Totally. But this is a new medium and it's a new platform and all of that. So I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm excited.
It's going to be so good, but I totally understand the nerves. I get it, but it's going to be great. It's awesome to be able to embark, on something new that you haven't done before.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. So it's called The Point of Pain. So people can check that out. And then I actually am going to be working with a company. I can't tell you too much yet, but I am going to be working with a company on a couple of products this year.
Oh my God, so it's happening. The dream is happening.
It's starting to happen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's starting to happen. Yeah. So it's very, slow start, taking it step by step, which is my favorite thing, just to slow and steady. Mm-hmm. But I'm really excited about it. This is the first time I've really even mentioned it. So,
oh man,
yeah. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm going to be working on a big conference that I also can't say too much about yet because it's still in the beginning stages. But I'm going to be working on a big conference this year that hopefully people will come to and enjoy. So I'm working on a bunch of stuff.
So much good stuff is ahead for 2019. I'm so excited for you. Thank you so much for coming on Seek the Joy podcast. This was such an awesome conversation, and I'm just so grateful for everything that you shared. And Nitika, where can everybody find you and connect and learn more?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. I absolutely loved our conversation, and I'm excited for more and to stay connected.
Yes.
Everyone can find me. I'm best on Instagram at Nitika Chopra, and you can also find me on my website, nitikachopra.com.
Perfect. And I'll put everything in the show notes and a link to your podcast so everybody can check it out. And Nitika,
thanks.
this was awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming on the podcast. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
We really talk about so much in this week's new episode, and I feel like we only just scratch the surface. It's really powerful and meaningful to hear someone's healing journey, but more than that, to hear how they've turned their healing journey into their passion and their career and their path. And what Nitika is doing is beautiful and so impactful. And I've had the best time following along on Instagram over the last couple of years. And so the opportunity to sit down and chat with her was amazing. It really was. And I'm so excited about her new podcast. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. And guys, thank you just so much for listening to this week's new episode. Thank you as always for being here. If you want to support Seek the Joy podcast, if you want to support my work on this show, I would be so grateful if you shared this episode or your favorite episode or the podcast in general with your friends or your family or your coworkers or at your yoga class, wherever it might be. And make sure to hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, and leave us a rating and review while you're at it. And make sure to join the conversation on our social media pages. I mainly hang out on Instagram when I am not publishing a new episode. But guys, thank you so much as always for being here, for listening, for being part of this community. This was such an awesome conversation. Thank you, Nitika. And I will see you guys right back here next week for another Seek the Joy Tuesday.